The media frenzy began within hours. By morning, every major outlet was running the story. Vale airs Amnesia love story. From enemies to forever. Adrian Vale's second chance at love. The narrative they spun was almost romantic, a redemption tale about a ruthless businessman who lost his memory and found his heart. Adrian watched the news coverage from his living room, coffee going cold in his hand. They dug up old photos of him and Elise at charity galas, gallery openings, society events. In every picture, he was looking at her with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Obsession, that's what Marcus had called it. The cameras had captured it perfectly. His phone buzzed constantly. Congratulations from business associates he didn't remember. Well wishes from friends whose faces meant nothing to him. And then, buried in the flood of messages, one from Elise. We need to get our story straight before the press conference tomorrow. My place, 7 p.m. Her text read. Adrian arrived at Elise's apartment that evening with a bottle of wine he wasn't sure she'd accept. She lived in a converted warehouse in the Arts District, the kind of space that had probably cost a fortune before his systematic campaign had left her broke. The door was already open when he reached her floor. Inside, the apartment was everything his penthouse wasn't. Color exploded from every surface. Canvases leaned against walls, some finished, some half completed. Paint splattered the wooden floors. It looked like a place where someone actually lived, created, and felt things. Elise stood in the center of it all, wearing paint-stained jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair pulled back in a messy knot. She looked more real than anyone he'd met since waking up. The wine won't fix anything, she said, not looking at him. I know, but I didn't know what else to bring. She finally turned to face him, and something in her expression had shifted. The anger was still there, but underneath, it was exhaustion. The press conference is tomorrow. They're going to ask how we fell in love, when we fell in love, and why we're still getting married despite your amnesia. We need a story that doesn't make me look like a gold digger and doesn't make you look like a manipulative bastard. Adrian chuckled softly. Isn't that what I am? Was Elise corrected, grabbing 2 glasses from her kitchen. It was what you were. Apparently. She poured the wine with hands that weren't quite steady. But here's the problem, Adrian. I don't know how to pretend to love someone who destroyed my life. I don't know how to smile at you like you're my future when all I see when I look at you is my past burning down. Adrian took the glass she offered. Then don't look at me. Look at who I am now. And who are you now? I don't know yet. But I'm not the man who did those things to you. I can't be. Because I don't have whatever drove him to do it. He sat down on her worn couch, suddenly feeling the weight of everything. That's the strange thing about amnesia. Everyone keeps telling me about this person I used to be. This monster who ruined lives and crushed anyone in his way. But I can't find him in here. He touched his chest. I look in the mirror and I don't see a villain. I just see someone trying to figure out how to be human. Elise was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those sharp artist's eyes. You know what the worst part is? I believe you. And I hate that I believe you. Because it would be so much easier to hate you completely if you were still the same arrogant asshole who tried to buy me like I was another property to acquire. Then tell me about it. Not just the contracts and the business. Tell me the personal part. She drank her wine in one long swallow and poured another glass. When she spoke, her voice was distant, like she was narrating someone else's life. You came to my gallery opening 2 years ago. Some tech billionaire had bought one of my pieces and invited you. I didn't know who you were then, which apparently never happens to Adrian Vale. You were charming, attentive, genuinely interested in my work. Or at least you seemed to be. She laughed bitterly. You asked me to dinner. I said no. You asked again. I said no again. You asked a 3rd time, and I finally told you the truth. That I could see exactly what you were. A rich man who was used to buying whatever he wanted, including people. That I'd rather starve than be another acquisition in your portfolio. And I'm guessing that's when I decided to make you starve. Adrian said with a sigh. Not right away. First, you tried to prove me wrong. You showed up at my studio with flowers and gifts and promises. You told me you weren't like other wealthy men, that you genuinely cared about art and about me. But I'd seen men like you before, Adrian. Men who think persistence is romantic when it's really just another form of control. She set her glass down with enough force that Adrian worried it might shatter. So I humiliated you. At a gala in front of your entire social circle, I told you exactly what I thought of you and your money and your empty charm. I told you that you were everything wrong with people who have never heard the word no. Adrian felt sick to his stomach. And then I made sure you'd hear that word for the rest of your life, he grumbled in realization. Elise nodded. Every gallery I approached suddenly had concerns about my work. Every investor I'd spent years cultivating mysteriously lost interest. Collectors who'd promised to buy pieces changed their minds. Venues canceled exhibitions. Critics who'd praised me started writing reviews that questioned whether I'd ever had talent in the first place. She met Adrian's eyes. It took me 3 months to realize it was you. Another month to confirm it. By then, I'd lost everything. My gallery, my reputation, and my future. All because I refused to have dinner with Adrian Vale. Jesus Christ, he exclaimed, still in shock. And then you showed up at my studio with that contract. You sat right there. She pointed to the couch where Adrian was sitting. And you told me you'd done me a favor. That I'd gotten too big, too confident. That I needed to learn humility. And that if I was smart, I'd take the deal you were offering because it was the only lifeline I was going to get. Adrian stood up, pacing to the window. Below, the city lights blurred. Did I really believe that? That I'd done you a favor by destroying your life? Elise, you believed you were entitled to me. And when you couldn't have me willingly, you decided to have me anyway, just in a different form. Elise walked over to stand beside him. The man you were? He was a monster wrapped in expensive suits and charity donations. He was the kind of person who convinced himself his cruelty was actually kindness, all because he was willing to fix what he'd broken as long as you paid the price he demanded. They stood in silence for a long time. Finally, Adrian spoke. Tomorrow, at the press conference, what do you want me to say? The truth. Elise answered. What truth? That I destroyed you, or that I don't remember doing it? Neither. Elise turned to face him fully. Tell them we met, we clashed, we fought like fire and gasoline. Tell them we challenged each other, pushed each other, made each other better. Tell them the accident gave us both a chance to see past our pride and anger. Tell them. She paused, something vulnerable flickering across her face. Tell them we're choosing to start over. Is that really what we're doing? Adrian asked. I don't know what we're doing, Adrian. But the world is going to be watching us for the next 2 years. We might as well give them a story worth watching. The press conference the next day was held at Vale Industries headquarters. Reporters packed the room, cameras flashing as Adrian and Elise entered hand in hand. It was the first time they'd touched beyond that forehead kiss in the hospital, and Adrian felt her fingers trembling in his. They'd practiced their story, rehearsed the key points. But when the first reporter asked, Mr. Vale, can you tell us about falling in love with Ms. Moreau? Adrian found himself abandoning the script entirely. Truth be told, I can't, he said honestly. The room went silent. I can't tell you about falling in love with Elise, because I don't remember it. The accident took that from me. It took everything from me. He squeezed her hand, hoping she'd understand. But here's what I can tell you. Every day since I woke up, I've been learning about the man I used to be. And a lot of what I've learned makes me ashamed. I wasn't kind or generous in any way. Instead, I used my power to hurt people, including Elise. Beside him, Elise stiffened, but he continued. So no, I can't tell you about falling in love the first time. But I can tell you about falling in love now. About meeting someone who has every reason to hate me and choosing to see who I am instead of who I was. About someone who's giving me a chance I probably don't deserve. He looked at Elise and found her staring at him with tears in her eyes. The accident didn't give me a second chance at life. Elise did. The cameras exploded with flashes. Questions erupted from every direction. But Adrian only saw Elise, who was looking at him like she was seeing him for the first time. Later, in the car back to her apartment, she was quiet. Adrian worried he'd gone too far, exposed too much. That wasn't what we agreed to say, she finally said. I know. I'm sorry if I... No. She cut him off. It was better. It was She trailed off, looking out the window. It made me want to believe you. You say that like it's a bad thing. Adrian chuckled. I don't know yet. Elise admitted. Over the next 2 weeks, they fell into a strange rhythm. Public appearances where they held hands and smiled for cameras. Private moments in her studio where she painted and he watched her, learning the way she moved and studying the concentration on her face whenever she was creating. Slowly, but carefully, they were building something that looked almost like friendship. But the Vale family watched with increasing hostility, and soon enough, they invited the couple to dinner. The dinner invitation came from Adrian's father, delivered through his assistant. A formal family dinner to celebrate the engagement, and attendance was mandatory. It's a trap, Marcus told Adrian over the phone. Celia's been poisoning Dad against Elise for weeks. This dinner is going to be a bloodbath. Then why are they hosting it? Adrian asked. Because that's how this family works. We smile for the cameras and stab each other at the dinner table. Welcome back to the fold, little brother. The Vale estate sat in the Hollywood Hills, a monument to wealth that had been in the family for 3 generations. Adrian pulled up with Elise beside him, her hand cold in his. Remember, she whispered as they walked to the door. We're happy and in love, and most importantly, we're united. Adrian nodded in agreement. We can do this. Inside, the dining room was set for 8. Adrian's father presided at the head of the table, his mother to his right. Celia sat beside her, already smiling that sharp smile. Marcus was there too, along with 2 people Adrian didn't recognize, but who introduced themselves as his uncle and aunt. The meal started civilly enough. Small talk about weather and business. But Adrian could feel the tension building with each course, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Finally, over dessert, Celia struck. Elise, I've been meaning to ask, how are the new commissions coming along? Adrian mentioned in the contract that you were guaranteed at least 5 major collectors within the 2 years. Elise's smile didn't waver. I'm in discussions with several interested parties. Celia scoffed, really? I heard the Heritage Gallery dropped you last week. Something about creative differences. Celia. Adrian's voice was sharp as he shouted her name. What? I'm just making conversation. Celia's eyes glittered with malice. I'm curious about Elise's career. After all, that's what this marriage is really about, isn't it? Adrian promised to fix what he broke. I'm just wondering if he's keeping his promises. He is, Elise said evenly. More than keeping them, actually. How generous of him. Tell me, what's it like knowing you're only sitting at this table because you signed a contract? That you're basically being paid to pretend to love a man who destroyed your life? Celia leaned forward. Does it feel empowering? Or does it feel like prostitution, just with better paperwork? Adrian slammed his hand on the table hard enough to make the crystal glasses ring. Enough. His father's voice cut through the room like ice. Adrian, control yourself. Control myself? Adrian scoffed. She just called Elise a prostitute at your dinner table. And you want me to control myself? Your sister is asking legitimate questions about a business arrangement that affects this entire family. His father set down his fork with deliberate precision. You brought a woman into our home who is here under contractual obligation. A woman you're paying to be your wife. Celia's language was indelicate, but her point stands. Adrian stood up, pulling Elise with him. We're leaving. Sit down. His father's voice carried the weight of decades of command. You'll leave when I dismiss you. For a moment, Adrian wavered. Every instinct screamed at him to obey, to fall back into whatever pattern of submission the old Adrian had established. But then he felt Elise's hand in his, trembling but steady, and something inside him hardened. No, Adrian said quietly. I'm not him anymore. I'm not the son who sits quietly while his family treats people like objects to be manipulated and controlled. Elise is here because I destroyed her career and then offered her a deal that looked like salvation, but was really just another form of control. You're right about that. But she's also here because she's braver than any of us, because she looked at that devil's bargain and took it anyway. Because she refused to let me win by destroying her completely. He looked around the table, at each face in turn. You want to know what it's like to have amnesia? It's like being born already damned by someone else's sins. Every day I learn something new about the person I was, and every day I'm more grateful I don't remember being him. Because the man I was would have probably sat at this table and let you tear her apart, because that's what this family does. We destroy people, then wonder why everyone fears us. Adrian pulled Elise toward the door. But I'm not going to be that man. Not anymore. They made it to the car before Elise broke down. She sobbed against his chest in the driveway while Adrian held her, his own eyes burning with tears he wouldn't let fall. Thank you, she whispered against his shirt. No one's ever defended me like that. You shouldn't have to be defended. You shouldn't have to be at war just to exist. She pulled back, looking up at him with eyes that held something new, something that looked almost like trust. The man you were would never have done what you just did. Good, he said. But Adrian? She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheeks. That also means you're not him. And if you're not him, then this whole arrangement, this contract, is built on someone who doesn't exist anymore. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't know who you are. And I don't know if I'm falling for the real you or just the ghost of the man who hurt me, wearing a better mask. She pulled away and walked to her side of the car. They drove back to the city in silence, the space between them somehow wider than it had been before. The next morning, Adrian found an envelope slipped under his door. Inside was a single page, a photocopy of the marriage contract. Someone had highlighted a paragraph in bright yellow. It was a clause he'd never seen before, buried in the middle of the document. An addendum written in Elise's handwriting, dated 2 weeks after the original signing. In the event that Adrian Vale regains the capacity to choose freely, unencumbered by the threats and manipulations that led to this arrangement, Elise Moreau retains the right to modify the terms of this contract to include penalties for breach of good faith, including but not limited to full restitution of all damages caused, both financial and reputational. Adrian read it twice, his blood turning cold. Elise had modified the contract. She'd added her own insurance policy, her own revenge clause, and she'd done it in a way that meant if he ever became the man he used to be again, if the old Adrian somehow returned, she'd have legal grounds to take him for everything. A note was paper-clipped to the photocopy, written in elegant script he didn't recognize. Thought you should know what your future wife really thinks of you. The marriage you're defending? It's another trap, and you're walking right into it. Signed, Celia. Adrian stood in his empty penthouse, the evidence of Elise's deception in his hands, and felt something crack inside him. The woman he defended, the woman he was starting to trust, had been planning her revenge all along. He called her. She answered on the first ring. Is it true? Adrian asked. Did you modify the marriage contract? The silence on the other end told him everything he needed to know. Adrian, I can explain. Just answer the question. Did you add a clause that would let you sue me for everything if I ever remember who I was? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. But you don't understand the context. I understand perfectly. I destroyed your life, so you're going to destroy mine. Is that it? You've just been waiting for the old me to come back, so you could spring your trap? It's way more complicated than that. Is it? Adrian laughed, but there was no humor in it. God, I really am a fool. I actually believed you were giving me a chance, but you were just playing a longer game. Adrian, please, let me explain. Meet me and let's talk face to face. He hung up. For 3 days, Elise called, and for 3 days, Adrian didn't answer. The wedding was in 1 week, and he was starting to think Marcus had been right all along. Everyone in his life was playing chess, and he was the only one who didn't know the rules. On the 4th day, Elise showed up at his penthouse. She'd bypassed the doorman somehow, was waiting in his living room when he came home from a meeting with his lawyers. How did you get in here? I told the doorman I was your fiancé and that I'd lost my key. He believed me. She stood up from the couch, and Adrian noticed she'd been crying. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. Will you please let me explain? There's nothing to explain. You modified the contract to punish me if I ever become my old self. It's pretty straightforward. It was insurance, Adrian, not revenge. She took a step toward him, and he took a step back. The hurt on her face was almost enough to make him feel guilty. When you showed up at my studio with that contract, when you sat there and told me I'd brought this on myself and that I needed to learn my lesson, I was terrified. Terrified of what you could do, what you'd already done. So yes, when I went to sign the contract, I added a clause. One that would protect me if you decided to destroy me all over again. And you didn't think I had a right to know about that? He asked. You were the one who destroyed my career. You were the one who forced me into this arrangement. Why should I have told you about the one thing I did to protect myself? Her voice rose. You want to be angry at me for not trusting you? Fine. Be angry. But don't pretend you're the victim here. I'm not him. Adrian shouted. How many times do I have to tell you that? I'm not the man who did those things to you. Then why are you acting exactly like him right now? Elise's eyes blazed. He saw my modification as betrayal too. He found it a week after I added it and came to my studio and threatened to void the entire contract, to leave me with nothing. I had to beg him to honor it, promising I'd never use the clause. I had to make myself small and scared just to please the great Adrian Vale. Adrian felt like he'd been punched, and Elise continued. Of course he'd found it. Someone like Adrian Vale would obviously have lawyers reading every word of every document 3 times. And yet he kept the contract anyway because he was so arrogant, thinking he'd never give me cause to use it. She wiped her eyes angrily. So yes, there's a clause that protects me. And yes, I didn't tell you about it when you woke up with amnesia. But you know what? After watching you defend me at that dinner, after seeing you stand up to your family, I was actually starting to believe that clause wouldn't matter, that you'd really changed. But now I think I was wrong. Because the minute you found something that made you doubt me, you didn't ask me about it or give me a chance to explain. You just assumed the worst and cut me off, exactly like he would have done. She walked to the door, then turned back one last time. The wedding is in 4 days. If you want to call it off, call your lawyers. I won't fight you. I'll walk away from everything, the contract, the promises, all of it. But if you show up at that ceremony, if you say those vows, then you better mean them, Adrian. Because I'm done being someone's pawn in a game I didn't ask to play. After she left, Adrian sat in the dark and tried to figure out who he was. Not who he'd been, or who everyone expected him to be. Just who he was right now in this moment. And that's when he realized that he didn't have an answer. If you're hooked on this story of redemption and revenge, hit that subscribe button. Because we're racing toward the epic conclusion, and what happens next will flip everything you think you know about Adrian and Elise on its head. See you in the grand finale.